I discovered an old photo of my grandmother Sara and her two sisters, and my great aunt Bella on the right was showing quite a lot of leg. And in fact, this picture from the 20s showed bare arms and bare legs up to the knee, and I was intrigued by it and wanted to paint it. So, as always, when I started the painting, I started with an outline that is very inaccurate in many, many respects. And then I started to fill the outline out with color. And I just sort of decided what the colors were going to be based on the black and white photo. And perhaps I was wrong, but it seemed to work pretty well. And as you can see, by the end of the live painting session, I had 3 women on a bench. Well, the bench isn't really visible, but 3 women seated, dressed a certain way, and yet it was still pretty hard to recognize them. And so I set to work on my grandmother Sara, trying to get her face right. And of course, all of my portraits are a little bit on the caricature side, which means I put more emphasis on the face than I do on the body. And sometimes I exaggerate certain facial features in order that the person may be easily recognized. So I have to apologize that my portraits are sometimes not as flattering as they might be, since I'm emphasizing character traits, but they're not intended to be mocking caricatures, but respectful portraits of the person. And so as I was working on my grandmother Sara, one of the challenges was that she had a sort of very mild lopsided smile. One part of her mouth was raised higher than the other, and I think that's characteristic of her. Even though I remember her only from when she was an older woman, I do remember that particular expression that she had. She had a sort of wry humor, and I wanted to capture that, but at the same time, I didn't want to make her look like an old woman in a painting where she's supposed to be a young woman. And so that's part of what I struggled with here. I struggled with having too many lines on her face in an attempt to reduce the lines. I sometimes lost character traits, and then I had to put them back in. So that's my struggle with all of the ladies here. I think that because my great aunt Bella was not with us, I actually allowed myself a little bit more leeway with her. And so artistically, I think I captured her, even though it might not be flattering and it might not be exactly the way that she looked. So my grandmother Sara came to Palestine to settle well before World War II. My mother was born in Israel. She's my mother's mother, and she gave birth to her in 1934. Next to her is the youngest daughter of the Cohen family, and her name was Anka, that stands for Hannah, and she was more fair-skinned and had fairer hair. My grandmother Sara had gray eyes. And then to the right of her was Bella, who was said to have the loveliest legs. She wasn't necessarily that pretty. She never got married. And she remained in Poland with her parents. And as far as I know, died there with them. Reportedly, they were thrown into the Dnieper. But this is a happy moment from their lives, and I like to paint siblings together. At this point, I had actually already signed the portrait, but I decided to bring back some of my grandmother's character traits and do a little bit more shading and a little bit more coloring. And I restored her lopsided smile that I love so much. So it could have been more flattering. It could have been, closer to reality. But what I feel that I did was capture the character of my grandmother, who was a very daring woman. She came to Palestine on her own for the Maccabiada, and then she remained, even though she had a limited visa. She met my grandfather Isaac there and got married, and they were the founders, among the founders of Beit Oved, which is a moshav, and they had basically a farm in which they grew fruit, and they had chickens, and they were very, very successful with their work. So this is my grandmother Sara, a Zionist, her sister Anka, who also came to Palestine, and her sister Bella, who didn't make it. And I'm really proud of this painting. It could have been better, but I feel that once you reach a certain point with a painting, you have to let it go and move on. So I hope you enjoyed this painting, and if you did, please subscribe to my channel if you have not yet. Press the bell icon for notifications, and I hope to see you next week when we start another painting.